In the quiet town of Oak Ridge, 17-year-old Logan Hayes finds himself standing alone in a courtroom, accused of crimes that could destroy his future. But Logan is no ordinary defendant. Armed with an extraordinary mind and an unyielding determination, he takes the audacious step of representing himself, shocking everyone, especially the stern and skeptical Judge Crawford. What begins as a teenager's fight to clear his name soon spirals into something far more dangerous. As Logan peels back the layers of the charges against him, he uncovers a web of lies, corruption, and greed that stretches far beyond his case. The evidence points to powerful figures who've manipulated the system for years, including those responsible for his father's wrongful conviction. Each revelation pulls Logan deeper into a shadowy conspiracy, where every move he makes could be his last. With the help of his tech-savvy best friend, Mason, and his fiercely loyal mother, Catherine, Logan embarks on a high-stakes quest for justice. But as threats escalate and the full scope of the conspiracy comes to light, Logan realizes the fight isn't just for his freedom, it's for the integrity of the entire system. Can one teenager, armed only with the truth and an unshakable resolve, take on a network of untouchable elites? Or will the forces working against him silence him before he has the chance? The answers lie within the halls of justice and the secrets buried deep in Oak Ridge. Prepare to uncover the truth in a story of courage, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of what's right. And so, it begins. Logan Hayes adjusted the sleeves of his thrift store suit, standing alone at the defendant's table in courtroom 305 of Oak Ridge Superior Court. His mother, Catherine, sat in the gallery behind him, her face a composed mask of support. The courtroom was packed. Curiosity and skepticism hung thick in the air. It wasn't every day that a 17-year-old chose to represent himself in a criminal trial. At the bench, Judge Thaddeus Crawford, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for harsh sentences, glanced down at Logan. His tone was laced with condescension. "Mr. Hayes, this isn't a high school debate club. You're facing serious charges. Are you sure you want to represent yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor," Logan replied calmly, his voice steady and devoid of the nervousness Crawford expected. "Where did you get your legal degree? TikTok University?" Crawford's sarcasm drew chuckles from the gallery, but Logan remained unfazed. Before Crawford could press further, the prosecutor, DA Claire Blackwood, rose from her seat. Polished and confident, she was a rising star in the legal community, known for her aggressive approach. "Your Honor, I move that we proceed." While unconventional, Mr. Hayes has the constitutional right to represent himself. Crawford sighed, rubbing his temples. "Very well. Miss Blackwood, your opening statement." Blackwood stepped to the podium, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, addressing the jury, "this is a case of clear intent. The defendant, Logan Hayes, accessed the school's secure database, altered academic records, and attempted to cover his tracks. We have logs showing unauthorized access from his laptop, and evidence recovered from his device corroborates his actions. This case isn't about potential or talent, it's about accountability." Her gaze flicked to Logan, as if daring him to interrupt. He didn't. Instead, he jotted down notes in precise handwriting, his expression unreadable. When it was Logan's turn, he rose and walked to the podium. Despite his young age, his posture exuded confidence. "Your Honor, members of the jury," Logan began, "this case is not what it appears to be. The evidence against me is circumstantial at best and fundamentally flawed at worst. By the end of this trial, I will not only prove my innocence but also reveal a much larger truth, one that calls into question the integrity of this prosecution." His words drew murmurs from the gallery. Blackwood's expression hardened, but Crawford leaned forward slightly, intrigued despite himself. Later that evening, Logan sat in his room, surrounded by stacks of borrowed law books and notebooks filled with meticulous annotations. The room was modest, the furnishings well-worn but clean, a testament to his mother's hard work. A knock on the door interrupted his study. It was Catherine. "Logan," she said gently, "you should get some rest." "I can't, Mom. This isn't just about me," Logan replied, glancing at a framed photo of his father on the desk. 3 years earlier, Alex Hayes, a respected defense attorney, had been convicted of jury tampering in a high-profile case. Logan remembered sitting in the courtroom as the gavel came down, sealing his father's fate. The evidence against Alex had seemed airtight, too airtight, Logan later realized. As Alex was led away in handcuffs, he had whispered to Logan, "The truth is like water, son. It finds a way out. Always." Those words stayed with Logan, fueling his determination. He spent the next 3 years learning the law, poring over his father's case files, and uncovering connections between Alex's conviction and powerful figures in Oak Ridge. Back in the courtroom, the prosecution called their first witness, the school's IT administrator. He detailed how unauthorized access had been traced to Logan's laptop, providing logs and technical explanations that sounded damning. When it was Logan's turn for cross-examination, he approached the witness stand with quiet confidence. "Mr. Reynolds," Logan began, "you testified that the unauthorized access originated from my laptop at 3:47 p.m. on October 15th, correct?" "Yes, that's what the logs show," Reynolds replied. "And where was my laptop located at that time?" "In the school library," Reynolds answered, glancing at the prosecution for reassurance. Logan nodded, producing a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, the attendance record from my AP Physics class, signed by my teacher, showing I was in her classroom on the 3rd floor from 3:15 to 4:30 p.m. that day." The gallery erupted in whispers. Crawford banged his gavel for order. Blackwood rose quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. This line of questioning is irrelevant to the charges." "Overruled," Crawford said, his interest clearly piqued. Logan turned back to Reynolds. "Is it possible for someone to spoof a device's MAC address and make it appear that a specific laptop was accessing the network when it wasn't?" Reynolds hesitated. "Yes, it's technically possible. And does the school security system prevent such spoofing?" "No, it doesn't," Reynolds admitted reluctantly. Logan stepped back, letting the implications sink in. "So, you can't verify that my laptop was the source of the unauthorized access, can you?" Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "No, I can't." As the trial adjourned for the day, Logan caught sight of a man in a dark suit leaving the courtroom. Their eyes met briefly, and the man's subtle smirk sent a chill down Logan's spine. That evening, Mason came over with new findings. "You won today, but they're not done. I found something bigger," he said, handing Logan a flash drive. On the drive were logs showing unauthorized access and suspicious grade changes linked to children of judges and prosecutors, patterns that stretched beyond Logan's case. "This isn't just about you," Mason said gravely. "They're protecting something huge." Logan's jaw tightened. "Then we bring it all down." The chapter ends with Logan staring out his bedroom window, the flash drive in hand, knowing that the fight was only beginning. The courtroom felt suffocating, but Logan Hayes remained calm as the gavel brought the day's proceedings to a close. Despite the apparent tension, he had landed a critical blow against the prosecution. The gallery buzzed with murmurs as he gathered his notes, and the look of uncertainty on DA Claire Blackwood's face wasn't lost on him. Yet, Logan knew better than to celebrate. He was playing a dangerous game, and this was just the beginning. That night, Logan sat in his cluttered bedroom, surrounded by stacks of borrowed law books and notebooks. His fingers traced the edges of a flash drive Mason had given him earlier. It contained logs, data, and more pieces to a puzzle that stretched far beyond his case. Logan leaned back in his chair, staring at the framed photo of his father on the desk. 3 years, he muttered under his breath, thinking of how long it had been since Alex Hayes, a respected attorney, had been convicted of jury tampering. He remembered the trial vividly. The overwhelming evidence, the smug faces of DA Blackwood and her team, and the heavy sound of the gavel that sentenced his father to 15 years in prison. But Logan also remembered something else, how none of it felt right. His father had whispered to him on the day of his conviction, "Stay strong, Logan. The truth always finds a way." At first, Logan didn't know what to do with that message. But in the months that followed, he began to see patterns. His father's clients had always been controversial, often going up against powerful corporations and wealthy individuals. One particular client stood out, Thomas Westbrook, the head of Westbrook Development Corporation. a company entangled in shady deals and government contracts. Logan realized that Alex's conviction had come right after he began probing Westbrook's involvement in several local scandals. Logan spent the next 3 years studying the law in secret, poring over Alex's case files, and building his knowledge. The flash drive Mason gave him was proof that his instincts had been right. His trial was just another step in a larger conspiracy, one designed to silence those who got too close. As Logan sifted through the files, the door opened quietly, and Catherine Hayes entered, her face a mask of worry. "You should be resting," she said, sitting on the edge of his bed. Logan looked up and gave her a small smile. "I can't. There's too much at stake. You're 17, Logan. You shouldn't have to carry this weight." "I'm not doing this just for me, Mom," Logan replied. "It's for Dad, and for everyone else they've crushed along the way." Catherine reached over and squeezed his hand. "I found something in the attic," she said. "Your dad's old files. There's a case from 5 years ago involving Westbrook Development. It's the same pattern, Logan. Bribed officials, falsified evidence, witnesses suddenly recanting. I think it's all connected." Logan's heart raced. He took the folder she handed him and began skimming through the documents. Names, dates, and financial records leapt off the page. It was more than enough to corroborate his suspicions. "They're protecting Westbrook," Logan murmured, "and they used Dad as a scapegoat to cover their tracks." Before Catherine could respond, there was a knock at the front door. Both froze. It was nearly midnight. Catherine rose cautiously, and Logan followed close behind. When they opened the door, Mason was standing on the porch, clutching a laptop bag and looking around nervously. "I had to come," he said, stepping inside quickly. "I found something big." Logan led Mason to the kitchen, where they spread out files and laptops. Mason connected his computer to the drive he'd been working on, pulling up data he had decrypted. "It's not just about your case," Mason explained. "The school's database has been tampered with for years. They've been monitoring emails, changing grades, and keeping tabs on certain students. Look at this." Mason clicked through folders, showing logs of emails flagged for specific keywords and records of altered grades for students connected to judges and prosecutors. This doesn't make sense," Catherine said, leaning over the table. "Why would they care about students' grades?" Logan frowned, piecing it together. "Because those students' parents are in positions of power. Judges, district attorneys, politicians. If they have leverage over their kids, they control the parents." Mason nodded. "It's blackmail, plain and simple. And look at these flag names. Your dad was on their radar before he was arrested. They were watching him for years." Logan's hands clenched into fists. "This isn't just corruption. It's a full-blown operation. And if they've been watching me, it means they already know I'm getting close." As if on cue, Logan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and saw an anonymous message. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Catherine's face paled. "Logan, this is serious. You need to step back. If they're willing to threaten you..." Logan shook his head. "That's exactly why I can't stop. They think they can intimidate us into silence. They did it to Dad, but they won't do it to me." The three worked late into the night, combing through the files and building a clearer picture of the conspiracy. By morning, they had uncovered connections between Westbrook Development, D.A. Blackwood, and a network of shell companies funneling money into political campaigns and judicial elections. As the sun rose, Mason leaned back in his chair, exhausted but satisfied. "This isn't just a defense, Logan. This is a bombshell. If we play this right, we're not just clearing your name. We're blowing their whole system apart." Logan looked at the stacks of evidence on the table and nodded. "Then we need to be ready. They'll come at us harder now." Catherine, standing by the window, watched the street nervously. "They already have. We just need to make sure they don't win." Outside, a dark sedan idled a few houses down, its occupants watching the Hayes household closely. Logan's fight was only beginning, but the stakes had never been higher. Logan Hayes walked into the courtroom the next morning, his mind racing with possibilities. The weight of the flash drive Mason had decrypted the night before felt almost unbearable, a physical reminder of the enormity of what they had uncovered. This wasn't just his fight anymore. His case was only the surface of a much deeper conspiracy. one that had already cost his father his freedom and now threatened to destroy his family. As he settled into his seat at the defendant's table, the atmosphere in the room was different. The spectators in the gallery whispered to one another. The media presence had grown, and Judge Crawford sat on the bench with an unusual level of intensity. Logan could feel eyes boring into him from all directions, but he kept his focus on the prosecution table. DA Claire Blackwood sat poised and confident, though there was an edge to her demeanor that hadn't been there before. The bailiff called the courtroom to order, and Judge Crawford wasted no time. "Miss Blackwood, you may call your next witness." Blackwood stood, her every movement calculated. The prosecution calls Principal Edward Mitchell to the stand. Logan watched Mitchell take the oath, his usual commanding presence diminished under the scrutiny of the courtroom. Mitchell had been a central figure in Logan's case, claiming that irregularities in the school's database had been traced directly to Logan's laptop. The prosecutor began her questioning. "Mr. Mitchell, can you describe the events that led to this investigation?" Mitchell cleared his throat, avoiding Logan's gaze. "We noticed unauthorized logins into the school system, and after a preliminary investigation by our IT department, the activity was traced back to Mr. Hayes' computer." "And what steps did you take after discovering this?" Blackwood pressed. "We contacted law enforcement immediately," Mitchell replied. "Given the nature of the breach, we believed it was necessary to take swift action." Logan listened carefully, taking detailed notes. He could see the cracks in Mitchell's testimony, but it wasn't time to exploit them yet. When Blackwood finished her direct examination, Judge Crawford turned to Logan. "Mr. Hayes, you may begin your cross-examination." Logan stood, straightened his tie, and approached the podium. His tone was calm, almost conversational. "Principal Mitchell, thank you for your testimony. I'd like to ask a few clarifying questions." Mitchell nodded hesitantly. "You mentioned that the unauthorized logins were traced to my laptop. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's correct." "And these logins occurred at 3:47 p.m. on October 15th? Mitchell glanced at Blackwood before answering. "That's what the logs indicate." Logan pulled out a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit A, a time-stamped attendance record from my AP Physics class, showing that I was in the classroom on the third floor from 3:15 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. that day." The courtroom murmured, and Blackwood quickly rose. "Objection. This doesn't disprove the logs." "Overruled," Crawford said, leaning forward with interest. "Continue, Mr. Hayes." Logan turned back to Mitchell. "Mr. Mitchell, would you agree that if I was physically in my AP Physics class, it would be difficult, if not impossible, for me to access a computer in the school library during that time?" Mitchell hesitated. "I suppose so." "And are you aware of methods by which someone could spoof a device's MAC address to make it appear that another computer was accessing the system?" Blackwood objected again, but Crawford allowed the question. Mitchell's discomfort was evident. "Yes, I'm aware of such methods." "Does the school security system prevent such spoofing?" Mitchell's voice grew quieter. "No, it doesn't." "So," Logan pressed, "you can't definitively say that my laptop was the source of the unauthorized access, can you?" Mitchell shifted in his seat. "No, I can't." The courtroom buzzed with whispers, and Logan felt a surge of confidence. This was only the beginning. After court adjourned for the day, Logan and Mason retreated to the Hayes home to regroup. Catherine had prepared a late dinner, but Logan barely touched his plate as Mason spread out his laptop and files on the dining table. "You hit them hard today," Mason said, typing furiously on his keyboard. "But they're going to come back swinging." "They always do," Logan replied, scanning a list of names connected to grade changes in the school's database. "What did you find?" Mason turned the laptop toward Logan, displaying an encrypted log of emails flagged by the school's monitoring system. "It's worse than we thought. They weren't just monitoring grades. They were watching specific students' communications. Look at this." Mason pointed to a highlighted list of names. "All of these kids are connected to judges, prosecutors, or high-ranking officials. They've been using the school system to gather leverage on their parents." Logan felt a chill run down his spine. "Blackmail," he said, his voice low. Mason nodded. "And there's more. I traced some of the flag data back to an external server owned by Westbrook Development. The mention of Westbrook made Logan's stomach tighten. "They're tying up loose ends," he muttered. Catherine, standing nearby, crossed her arms. "If they've been watching these kids, what's stopping them from watching you?" As if in response, Logan's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up and read the message aloud. "Stay out of this, or you'll wish you had." The room fell silent. "What do we do now?" Mason asked, breaking the tension. Logan stared at the message for a long moment before answering. "We keep going. If they're threatening us, it means we're getting close." That night, Logan sat by his bedroom window, watching the empty street below. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Somewhere out there, powerful people were scrambling to protect their secrets. The next morning, Mason arrived with news. "I cracked another layer of their system," he said, holding up his laptop. "There's a backdoor in the school's network connected to external surveillance software. They've been using it to spy on emails, search history, everything." Logan nodded. "This isn't just about me anymore. They've been running this operation for years, and it's time someone exposed them." Outside, the same dark sedan idled near the curb, its occupants watching the Hayes household with growing interest. Logan Hayes woke to the sound of muffled voices outside his bedroom. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains as he hurriedly dressed and made his way downstairs. In the kitchen, Mason sat hunched over his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Catherine Hayes leaned against the counter, her expression tense. "What's going on?" Logan asked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "We've got a problem," Mason said without looking up. "They're watching us. And I don't just mean surveillance. I think they're planning something big." Mason spun the laptop around to show a series of flagged IP addresses. "These are active pings from a private network tied to Marcus Sterling's security firm. They've been running vehicle logs, phone records, everything. It's like they're preparing for something." "Sterling," Logan muttered. The name sent a chill down his spine. Marcus Sterling was Westbrook Development's enforcer, a shadowy figure who operated in the gray areas of legality. If he was involved, things were about to escalate. Before Logan could respond, Catherine's phone buzzed. She frowned at the screen. "It's the hospital. They're saying I need to come in for an emergency shift." "But it's your day off," Logan said. "I know," Catherine replied, already grabbing her coat. "But if I don't show up, they'll say I'm abandoning my patients." "Stay close to Mason, Logan. And be careful." As the door closed behind her, Logan felt a knot of unease form in his stomach. Something wasn't right. By mid-morning, Mason had uncovered even more troubling information. "Look at this," he said, pointing to an encrypted file he had just decrypted. "It's a list of addresses, all connected to people who've testified against Westbrook or Blackwood in the past. Some of them disappeared afterward." Logan scanned the list, his heart sinking as he recognized a few names from his father's old cases. "They're silencing anyone who threatens them," he said, "and they're getting away with it." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Logan and Mason exchanged a wary glance. "Expecting someone?" Mason asked. "No," Logan replied, moving cautiously toward the door. He opened it to find a delivery driver holding a package. "Logan Hayes?" the driver asked. "Yeah," Logan said, accepting the box. But as he closed the door and turned it over in his hands, he noticed something strange. There was no return address. "What is it?" Mason asked. Logan carefully opened the box. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. He unfolded it to reveal 3 words written in bold, black ink: "Stop. Or else." Mason swore under his breath. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. Logan's phone buzzed again, and this time it was worse. A picture message showed Catherine sitting in her car, her face framed by a sniper's crosshairs. Logan's mind raced as he stared at the screen. Mason grabbed his shoulder. "We need to call the police." "No," Logan said firmly. "We don't know who we can trust. If Sterling's got people inside the system, going to the authorities might just tip him off." Mason's jaw tightened. "So what do we do?" Logan took a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly. "We find her ourselves. You said Sterling's network was active earlier. Can you track where the signals are coming from?" "Already on it," Mason replied, diving back into his laptop. As Mason worked, Logan paced the room, his thoughts swirling. His father had always told him that desperation made people dangerous, and Sterling's threats were proof that they were getting close to something big. After what felt like an eternity, Mason looked up. Got it. They're pinging from an industrial complex on the edge of town. It's a private warehouse owned by, surprise, Westbrook Development. Logan grabbed his coat. Let's go. The drive to the warehouse was tense. Mason had pulled up satellite maps of the area, highlighting potential entry points and security risks. If Sterling's there, he's not alone, Mason warned. I know, Logan said, gripping the steering wheel. But we don't have a choice. If we wait, they might move her. When they arrived, Logan parked a block away, and the two approached on foot. The warehouse was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire, and several black SUVs were parked near the entrance. Mason crouched behind a stack of wooden pallets, his laptop balanced on his knees. There's a security feed, he said. Give me a minute to loop the cameras. Logan nodded, his eyes scanning the area for guards. The place was heavily patrolled, but they had an advantage. Sterling's team didn't know they were coming. Done, Mason whispered. You've got about 5 minutes before the system resets. Logan slipped through a gap in the fence and made his way toward the building. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, with rows of crates stacked high against the walls. He moved quietly, his heart pounding with every step. As he rounded a corner, he saw her. Catherine was tied to a chair in the center of the room, her face pale but determined. Standing a few feet away was Marcus Sterling, a towering figure in a tailored suit, his cold eyes fixed on Catherine. You've got guts, Mrs. Hayes, Sterling said, but you should have taught your son when to quit. Logan gritted his teeth, staying hidden in the shadows. He needed a plan. Back outside, Mason worked furiously to disable the building's alarms. Come on, he muttered, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Inside, Sterling stepped closer to Catherine. Your son's clever, he said. I'll give him that. But clever only gets you so far. Before Sterling could say more, Logan stepped into the light. Let her go, he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Sterling turned slowly, a cruel smile spreading across his face. And here he is, the prodigy himself. I'm serious, Logan said, taking another step forward. Let her go, or this gets ugly. Sterling laughed. You think you're in control here? You're just a kid, Logan. And kids don't win against men like me. Logan smirked. That's what you think. At that moment, the lights in the warehouse flickered and died. Mason's voice came through Logan's earpiece. You're clear. Get her out. Chaos erupted as Logan charged forward, dodging Sterling's swing and cutting the ropes binding Catherine's wrists. Together, they bolted for the exit, weaving through the darkness as Sterling shouted orders to his men. By the time they reached the car, Mason was already in the driver's seat. Go, 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 Logan shouted, and Mason slammed the gas pedal. As they sped away, Catherine turned to Logan, her voice trembling. You shouldn't have come for me. It was too dangerous. I had to, Logan said. They're not going to stop, Mom. But neither are we. In the back seat, Mason held up a small USB drive. While you were busy, I grabbed this from Sterling's office. It's encrypted, but if it's anything like the last drive, it could be exactly what we need to take him down. Logan nodded, his determination hardening. Sterling had made one mistake. He underestimated the Hayes family. Logan Hayes sat in his bedroom, the house unusually quiet after the chaos of the day before. On his desk lay a small USB drive, pristine, yet heavy with the promise of answers. Mason had already started decrypting its contents, his expertise ensuring that they would uncover whatever secrets Marcus Sterling had been so desperate to hide. Catherine, still visibly shaken from her abduction, entered the room. Logan, we need to talk, she said, her voice soft but insistent. Logan turned away from the USB drive. What is it, Mom? Catherine sat on the edge of his bed, her gaze steady. This fight, it's bigger than us. You've been brilliant so far, but you're pushing against people who won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to win. I know, Logan replied, but if we back down now, they'll win. Dad's already lost 3 years of his life because of them. I'm not letting them destroy anyone else. Catherine studied her son for a moment, then nodded. Then you need to know everything. She reached into her bag and pulled out a file, the edges worn from age. I found this in your father's things. It's from one of his old cases, one he never talked about. The name Westbrook Development keeps coming up. Logan took the file, flipping through pages of contracts, financial records, and handwritten notes. His pulse quickened as he recognized some of the names: judges, prosecutors, and even school officials. It's all connected, he murmured. It always was, Catherine said. They've been running this operation for years, controlling elections, contracts, even the justice system. Your dad got too close, and they made sure he paid for it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mason stepped in, holding his laptop. His expression was grim. I cracked the drive, he said. You're going to want to see this. The three of them gathered around the laptop as Mason opened a folder labeled Priority. Inside were dozens of documents, emails, and financial records detailing an elaborate web of corruption. Westbrook Development has been funneling money into shell companies for years, Mason explained. They're using those companies to bribe officials, pay off witnesses, and manipulate court decisions. Logan's eyes scanned the screen, piecing together the scope of the operation. This isn't just about Dad's case. They've rigged everything: schools, elections, even public projects. Mason nodded. And it gets worse. Look at this. He pulled up a series of emails between Marcus Sterling and Claire Blackwood. Logan read them aloud. We need to make an example of Hayes. If his son keeps digging, handle it. He paused, anger rising in his chest. Blackwood knew. She's been working with Westbrook all along. Catherine placed a hand on Logan's shoulder. This is enough to bring them down. We can't keep this to ourselves. Logan thought for a moment, his mind racing. We need someone on the inside. Someone who can turn this evidence into action. The next day, Logan arrived at the courthouse, the USB drive hidden in his pocket. The morning session of his trial was routine. More testimony from the prosecution's witnesses, more attempts to paint Logan as a reckless teenager. But Logan had other plans. When the trial adjourned for lunch, he approached DA Claire Blackwood outside the courtroom. Miss Blackwood, he said, his voice steady but firm. She turned, her expression unreadable. What do you want, Mr. Hayes? Logan held up the USB drive. I have something you need to see. Something that could change everything. Blackwood raised an eyebrow, skeptical. You think I'm going to fall for one of your tricks? It's not a trick, Logan replied. It's proof. Proof that Westbrook has been manipulating the system for years. And proof that you've been a part of it. Her composure faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained control. If you're trying to threaten me, it won't work. I'm not threatening you, Logan said. I'm giving you a choice. Help me expose this, and you might still salvage your career. Keep covering for them, and you'll go down with the rest of them. Blackwood hesitated, her confidence cracking under the weight of Logan's words. Finally, she nodded. Bring it to my office. But if this is a waste of my time... It won't be, Logan interrupted. That afternoon, Logan sat across from Blackwood in her office, the USB drive plugged into her computer. As she scrolled through the files, her face grew pale. This, she began, her voice trembling. This is damning. It's the truth, Logan said. And it's just the beginning. If you help me, we can take them down. Westbrook, Sterling, all of them. Blackwood closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. You don't understand, Logan. These people, they're untouchable. If I go against them, they'll destroy me. They're not untouchable, Logan said firmly. We already have the evidence. All we need is someone brave enough to act on it. Blackwood studied him for a long moment, then sighed. I'll need time. If I'm going to do this, I need to build a case that's airtight. No loopholes, no excuses. Then start here, Logan said, sliding a folder across the desk. It's everything we found so far. You'll find more if you dig deeper. As Logan left Blackwood's office, he felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had taken a gamble, and it wasn't clear if it would pay off. But there was no turning back now. That evening, Mason called with an update. You're not going to believe this, he said. The files on the drive, They connect to federal contracts. Westbrook's corruption goes way beyond our town. Logan's heart sank. How far does it go? Far, Mason replied. We're talking senators, federal agencies, even international deals. This isn't just a local conspiracy. It's national. Logan hung up, his mind spinning. The fight had just gotten bigger and far more dangerous. Logan Hayes couldn't shake the unease that settled over him as he sat at the kitchen table, poring over the new evidence Mason had uncovered. The scope of the conspiracy was far larger than he'd imagined. Westbrook Development wasn't just bribing local officials or rigging small-town contracts. It was running a nationwide network of corruption. Federal contracts, international money laundering, and political influence spanned far beyond Oak Ridge. His mother, Catherine, walked into the room carrying a tray of coffee and sandwiches. "You need to eat," she said, placing the tray beside him. "I can't stop now," Logan replied. "This goes all the way to the top, Mom. If we don't act fast, they'll cover their tracks." Catherine sat beside him, her expression serious. "You're right, but this is bigger than anything we've dealt with before. You can't take it on alone." Before Logan could respond, Mason burst into the room, laptop in hand. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice tense. "Sterling's men are moving. There's chatter about a hit." Logan's stomach dropped. "A hit on who?" "On you, your mom, anyone tied to the case," Mason said. "I intercepted a message about making sure the Hayes problem goes away for good." Catherine's face paled. "We need protection, Logan. This has gone too far." Logan spent the next hour on the phone with Detective Jack Callahan, the only law enforcement officer he trusted. Callahan arrived at their house later that evening, his face grim. "I've been keeping tabs on Sterling," Callahan said as he stepped into the living room. "He's got connections everywhere, law enforcement, private security, even the DA's office. If he's making moves, we need to act fast." "What about the FBI?" Catherine asked. Callahan shook his head. "We've forwarded some of the evidence, but it takes time for them to mobilize. Meanwhile, we're dealing with a group of people who don't play by the rules." Logan leaned forward. "Then we need to force their hand. If we expose enough now, they won't have time to react." Callahan raised an eyebrow. "You've got a plan?" "I do," Logan said, "but it's risky." The next morning, Logan and Mason worked to compile every piece of evidence they had, organizing it into a presentation they planned to deliver during the trial. The goal was simple: reveal enough to force federal involvement while drawing public attention to the case. "I've cross-referenced everything," Mason said, typing furiously on his laptop. "Emails, financial records, even the grade tampering logs. It's airtight." Logan nodded, but a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. Sterling wouldn't sit idly by while they unraveled his empire. That doubt was confirmed when Mason received a notification on his phone. "We've got a breach," he said, his voice urgent. "Someone's trying to delete files from the school servers. Can you stop it?" Logan asked. "I already backed everything up," Mason replied. "But this means they know we're close." As Logan prepared to head to court, Catherine intercepted him. "Wait," she said, placing a hand on his arm. "I got a call this morning from someone who says they worked on your father's case. He's ready to testify." "Who is it?" Logan asked. "A juror," Catherine said. "He admitted he was pressured by Sterling to vote guilty. He's scared, but he's willing to talk." Logan's mind raced. This was the break they needed, a direct witness to the corruption that had condemned his father. The courtroom was packed when Logan arrived, the gallery buzzing with reporters and onlookers. Judge Crawford took his seat, his usual stern demeanor even more pronounced. DA Claire Blackwood was already at her table, her expression unreadable. Logan couldn't tell whether she had fully committed to helping him or was still weighing her options. As the trial began, Blackwood stood to deliver her next argument. But instead of attacking Logan, she turned to address the court. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, "new evidence has come to light that significantly impacts this case. I request that this evidence be entered into the record immediately." The gallery erupted in murmurs as Blackwood submitted a folder filled with documents from the USB drive Logan had given her. "What is this?" Judge Crawford asked, flipping through the files. Proof of systemic corruption, Blackwood said. Bribes, tampering, and coordinated efforts to manipulate the justice system, all tied to Westbrook development. Logan watched as Crawford's expression shifted from skepticism to anger. "This is extraordinary," the judge muttered. As the evidence was presented, Principal Mitchell was called back to the stand. Under cross-examination, Logan pressured him into admitting that he had altered grades under direct orders from Marcus Sterling. "Why did you do it?" Logan asked. "They said it was just special considerations," Mitchell replied, sweating profusely. "But when I tried to stop, they threatened my family." The gallery erupted in whispers again, and Judge Crawford banged his gavel. "Order in the court." Logan stepped back, his voice steady. "Your Honor, this isn't just about my case. This is about a system designed to silence people who speak out and protect those in power." During the lunch recess, Logan received a call from Callahan. "We've got a problem," the detective said. "Sterling's been seen near the courthouse. He's not going to take this lying down." Logan's jaw tightened. "Let him come. The more desperate he gets, the more mistakes he'll make." "You don't understand," Callahan said. "They're not just after evidence anymore. They're coming for you." The trial resumed, and Logan presented the testimony of the juror from his father's case. The man, visibly nervous, recounted how Sterling had approached him with threats and bribes to ensure Alex Hayes' conviction. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Logan asked. "I was scared," the juror admitted. "Sterling made it clear what would happen to me if I talked." Judge Crawford leaned forward, his voice cold. "And now?" The juror swallowed hard. "Now, I want to make it right." As the day ended, Logan left the courthouse surrounded by a tense silence. Outside, a dark SUV idled at the curb. Logan met Mason's gaze, and they both understood what it meant. "They're watching," Mason said. "Let them," Logan replied. "Tomorrow, we end this." The courtroom was nearly silent as Logan Hayes walked toward his seat at the defense table. Every step echoed loudly in his ears, but his mind remained sharp. He had spent the night preparing for the next phase of his trial, but the weight of what they'd uncovered, bribery, tampering, intimidation, felt heavier than ever. Marcus Sterling was in the gallery today, sitting in the back row like a vulture waiting for his moment. His presence didn't go unnoticed. Judge Crawford glanced at him briefly, the expression on his face unreadable. The tension in the room was electric. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. "Miss Blackwood," Judge Crawford began, addressing the prosecutor, "you may call your next witness." Claire Blackwood rose, her usual confidence tinged with visible unease. Logan couldn't tell whether she was regretting her decision to cooperate with him or if she was merely calculating her next move. "The prosecution calls Detective Jack Callahan to the stand," Blackwood said. Detective Callahan took his oath and sat stiffly in the witness chair. Blackwood approached with a folder of evidence. "Detective," she began, "can you confirm that you've been investigating allegations of systemic corruption involving Westbrook Development and its affiliates?" Callahan nodded. "Yes, I've been working on this case for months. It started with whistleblower testimony but expanded when we uncovered financial records tied to key officials in the county." Blackwood continued, her voice steady. "And did your investigation uncover any connection between these activities and the charges against Logan Hayes?" Callahan hesitated, glancing at Logan before answering. "Yes. The evidence suggests that Logan Hayes was targeted because his father, Alex Hayes, came too close to exposing this network 3 years ago. When Logan began investigating on his own, they fabricated charges to silence him." The gallery erupted in murmurs, but a sharp gavel strike from Judge Crawford brought order. Blackwood returned to her seat, and Logan stood for his cross-examination. "Detective Callahan," Logan began, "you mentioned fabricated charges. Can you elaborate on how these charges were created?" Callahan cleared his throat. "The access logs from the school's database were falsified to make it appear that your laptop was responsible for the breach. Additionally, evidence was planted on your device to bolster the charges." "And who orchestrated this?" Logan pressed. Callahan hesitated but eventually said, "Marcus Sterling and his team, acting under orders from Westbrook Development's leadership." Logan nodded, turning toward the jury. No further questions, Your Honor. During the lunch recess, Logan and Mason stayed in the courthouse library, sifting through files while Catherine paced nervously nearby. They're running out of options, Mason said, his voice low. Sterling wouldn't be here if they weren't desperate. Catherine stopped pacing. Desperate people are dangerous, Logan. You need to be careful. Before Logan could respond, his phone buzzed with a new message. The text was short but chilling. Meet me. Parking garage. Now. Against Catherine's protests, Logan made his way to the courthouse parking garage. The shadows of the dimly lit structure loomed large, each echoing footstep setting his nerves on edge. Sterling was waiting for him near a black SUV, his imposing figure partially hidden in the shadows. "You've got guts, kid," Sterling said, his voice smooth but threatening. Logan stopped a safe distance away. "What do you want?" Sterling smirked. "What I've always wanted. Control. But you're making things difficult. This little crusade of yours, it needs to end. And if it doesn't?" Logan asked, his voice steady. Sterling stepped closer, his eyes cold. "Your mother works late-night shifts at County General, doesn't she? Dangerous neighborhood. Would be a shame if something happened." Logan's jaw clenched, but he didn't back down. "Threats won't work on me. I've got enough evidence to bury you and everyone you work for." Sterling chuckled darkly. "Evidence can disappear. People can disappear. Let me make this simple. Drop the case. Take a plea deal. Walk away, and your family stays safe." Logan stared at him, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He knew what was at stake, but he also knew he couldn't give in. "You're scared," Logan said, his voice cutting through the tension. "You wouldn't be here if you weren't losing control." Sterling's smirk faded. "This is your last warning, boy. Make the right choice." Logan returned to the library, his hands trembling slightly. Mason and Catherine looked up as he entered. "What happened?" Mason asked. "Sterling," Logan said simply. "He wants me to take a plea deal. Says they'll leave us alone if I drop the case." Catherine's face tightened. "Logan, you can't." "I'm not," Logan interrupted. "But we need to be ready. They're going to come after us harder now." The afternoon session resumed with Logan presenting his next piece of evidence, detailed records of payments from Westbrook Development to offshore accounts linked to local officials. These payments coincide with key decisions made by those officials, Logan explained to the jury. Decisions that benefited Westbrook at the expense of the public. Blackwood added, "Your Honor, these records also show payments made to witnesses in Alex Hayes' trial, further undermining the integrity of his conviction." Judge Crawford studied the documents intently. "This is damning evidence," he said. "Do you have more?" Logan nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. And tomorrow, I'll present testimony from a juror in my father's case who was coerced into voting guilty." After court adjourned, Logan, Mason, and Catherine met with Detective Callahan in a secure location. Callahan's expression was grim. "I've been monitoring chatter," he said. "Sterling's men are planning something big. They don't just want to intimidate you. They want to end this by any means necessary." Logan's resolve hardened. "Then we hit them first. Tomorrow, we bring it all out. Everything we've got." That night, Logan sat at his desk, staring at the files spread before him. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, but he knew there was no turning back. "This ends tomorrow," he whispered to himself. Outside, a black SUV idled briefly before disappearing into the night. The courthouse was packed, buzzing with anticipation. The media presence had grown larger, with reporters scrambling for front-row seats in the gallery. Logan Hayes sat at the defense table, scanning the room. He could feel the weight of every glance, every whisper. Today, everything would come to light. Judge Crawford entered the courtroom, his expression stern but composed. As he banged his gavel, the room fell silent. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. "Mr. Hayes," Judge Crawford said, turning his sharp gaze toward Logan, "you may proceed with your evidence." Logan stood, his heart pounding but his resolve firm. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Robert Martinez to the stand." The name sent ripples through the room. Martinez had been a juror in Alex Hayes' trial, and his testimony had played a pivotal role in the guilty verdict. As Martinez approached the witness stand, The tension in the room thickened. He avoided eye contact with the gallery, his hands trembling as he took the oath. "Mr. Martinez," Logan began, his voice steady, "you were a juror in the trial of Alex Hayes 3 years ago. Is that correct?" "Yes," Martinez replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "And you testified that you witnessed Alex Hayes tampering with the jury. Is that also correct?" Martinez nodded hesitantly. Logan stepped closer. "But that wasn't the truth, was it?" The gallery erupted in murmurs. Judge Crawford banged his gavel. "Order." Martinez looked at Logan, his face pale. "No, it wasn't," he admitted. "Then why did you testify against him?" Martinez took a deep breath. "I didn't have a choice. Marcus Sterling approached me a week before the trial. He said if I didn't testify, my family would be in danger." Logan let the revelation hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "Did Sterling provide any evidence of the alleged tampering?" "No," Martinez said, his voice growing steadier. "He just told me what to say and promised I'd be protected if I cooperated." The courtroom buzzed with outrage. Logan turned to the jury. "This testimony proves that my father's conviction was not only unjust but orchestrated by Westbrook Development and its enforcers. Marcus Sterling didn't just manipulate this case. He's been manipulating the entire system." As Logan returned to his seat, he saw DA Claire Blackwood rise. "Your Honor," Blackwood said, her tone sharp, "the prosecution would like to request a recess to verify this new testimony and its implications." Judge Crawford shook his head. "Denied. We will proceed. Call your next witness, Mr. Hayes." Logan called Detective Jack Callahan to the stand. Callahan's testimony was equally damning. "Detective," Logan began, "can you confirm that you've been investigating corruption tied to Westbrook Development?" "Yes," Callahan said. "And what have you discovered?" Callahan opened a file. "We've uncovered bribes, blackmail, and falsified evidence involving multiple officials, including those tied to Alex Hayes' conviction and Logan Hayes' current charges." Logan nodded. "And who is at the center of this operation?" "Marcus Sterling, acting under the orders of Thomas Westbrook," Callahan said without hesitation. The gallery erupted again, and Judge Crawford's gavel slammed down. The trial resumed after a short recess. This time, Logan presented financial records that Mason had uncovered, records that showed payments from Westbrook Development to officials across the county, including DA Blackwood's office. "These payments," Logan said, holding up the documents, "coincide with decisions that benefited Westbrook Development, including the dismissal of cases against their executives and the targeting of individuals like my father." Blackwood's face betrayed no emotion, but Logan saw the tension in her jaw. "Your Honor," Logan continued, "this isn't just about my case. This is about a system that's been corrupted at every level, from the courts to law enforcement to education." Judge Crawford leaned forward. "Miss Blackwood, do you have a response?" Blackwood stood slowly, her composure cracking. "Your Honor, the prosecution concedes that these allegations merit further investigation. However, Before she could finish, the courtroom doors burst open. 2 federal agents entered, their badges prominently displayed. "Your Honor," one agent announced, "we have a warrant to take Marcus Sterling into custody. He's wanted in connection with multiple federal offenses." The gallery was in an uproar as the agents approached Sterling, who sat in the back row. He rose calmly, but his smug expression faltered as they placed him in handcuffs. As Sterling was led away, Logan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. But he knew the fight wasn't over. Judge Crawford turned to Logan. "Mr. Hayes, do you have anything further to present?" "Yes, Your Honor," Logan said. "I'd like to enter into evidence an email exchange between Marcus Sterling and Thomas Westbrook. These emails detail their plans to manipulate jury selections and fabricate charges against individuals who threaten their interests." The judge reviewed the emails, his expression darkening with each page. "This evidence is damning," he said. "Miss Blackwood, do you wish to continue this prosecution?" Blackwood hesitated before finally shaking her head. "No, Your Honor. The state moves to dismiss all charges against Logan Hayes." The courtroom erupted in applause, but Logan didn't celebrate. He knew this was just the beginning. As the crowd dispersed, Catherine embraced him tightly. "You did it," she whispered. No, Logan replied. We started it. Now we have to finish it. That evening, Logan, Mason, and Catherine gathered at home with Detective Callahan. They reviewed the day's events and began planning their next steps. This isn't just about Westbrook anymore, Callahan said. We're finding links to state officials, federal contracts, even international operations. It's bigger than any of us thought. Mason nodded. But we have the evidence. And now the feds are involved. Logan leaned back in his chair, exhausted but determined. We keep pushing. We've got the momentum now, and they know it. Outside, another black SUV idled briefly before disappearing into the night. Logan knew the battle was far from over. The air outside the courthouse was electric. Logan Hayes stood on the steps, staring out at the swarm of reporters, flashing cameras, and murmuring onlookers. The dismissal of charges against him was a monumental victory, but he couldn't afford to celebrate. The battle was far from over. By the time Logan returned home, the atmosphere had already shifted. Detective Callahan was waiting for him at the dining table, files spread out before him. Mason sat nearby, typing furiously on his laptop, while Catherine paced the room, her worry evident. We've got a problem, Callahan said, breaking the tense silence. Sterling may be in custody, but Westbrook isn't going down without a fight. They're already regrouping. What are they planning? Logan asked, sitting down beside him. Callahan pointed to a list of names. We intercepted communication suggesting Westbrook is reaching out to high-level officials, judges, even state legislators. They're trying to discredit the evidence you presented, suppress ongoing investigations, and rebuild their network. Logan's jaw tightened. They're buying time. Mason looked up from his laptop. It's worse than that. They're not just playing defense. They're going after anyone they see as a threat. Whistleblowers, witnesses, even federal agents. Catherine stopped pacing. Logan, you've already done so much. Let the feds handle it now. Logan shook his head. We've come too far to stop. If we wait, they'll bury everything. We need to force their hand. The next morning, Logan called Claire Blackwood to meet him at a neutral location, a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town. She arrived looking wary but resolute, her usual polished demeanor softened by the events of the trial. You've got nerve asking me to meet you here, Blackwood said, sitting across from him. I'm not here to argue, Logan replied. I need your help. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. Help with what? My career is already on the brink thanks to you. Logan slid a folder across the table. This isn't just about Westbrook anymore. We've uncovered connections to state officials, federal contracts, and even international deals. If we don't act now, they'll cover their tracks and rebuild stronger than ever. Blackwood opened the folder, her expression shifting as she skimmed the contents. This is bigger than I thought. It is, Logan said. And we need someone inside the system who can make sure this evidence sees the light of day. Someone who knows how they operate. Blackwood sighed, closing the folder. You're asking me to risk everything. I'm asking you to do the right thing, Logan replied. You've seen what they're capable of. This is your chance to make it right. After a long pause, Blackwood nodded. I'll help, but we need to move fast. By midday, the Hayes household had become a war room. Callahan, Mason, Catherine, and Blackwood worked together to plan their next steps. We need to create a public record, Blackwood said, spreading out a map of the city. Once the evidence is out there, it'll be harder for them to bury it. Agreed, Mason said, pulling up live feeds on his laptop. We'll leak it to multiple outlets, media, watchdog groups, even social media. The more people see it, the harder it'll be to shut down. Logan leaned over the table. And what about the witnesses? If we're going public, they'll be in more danger than ever. Callahan nodded. I've already coordinated with federal agents. We're setting up protection for everyone who's come forward. But we'll need to act quickly. Once Westbrook realizes what's happening, they'll escalate. That evening, Logan received a message from an unknown number. You think you've won? Watch your back. He showed the message to Callahan, who frowned. They're trying to intimidate you. But it also means they're running out of options. Mason's voice broke the tension. I've got something. He turned his laptop to face the group, displaying a financial ledger linked to Thomas Westbrook. This ledger shows direct payments to state officials, Mason explained. Judges, politicians, even law enforcement. It's the smoking gun. Logan's eyes scanned the screen. How soon can we get this out? Tonight, Mason said. But once we do, there's no going back. At midnight, Logan, Mason, and Blackwood finalized the upload. Within minutes, the ledger was live on multiple platforms, accompanied by summaries of the evidence they had gathered. Social media exploded with outrage as journalists and activists began sharing the story. By morning, the news had reached national headlines. Corruption scandal engulfs state officials. One headline read, Westbrook Development accused of bribery and blackmail, read another. The fallout was immediate. Calls for investigations flooded the state capitol, and federal agencies ramped up their efforts. But the victory came with a cost. That afternoon, Mason received an alert. Logan, he said, his voice urgent, we've got a breach. What kind of breach? Logan asked, moving to Mason's side. They're targeting our backups, Mason explained. Someone's trying to wipe everything we uploaded. Can you stop it? I'm trying, Mason said, typing furiously. But they've got resources. This is a full-scale attack. Logan's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message. The screen showed Catherine at the hospital, surrounded by security guards. A man's voice played over the footage. You've made your choice. Now it's our turn. Logan's chest tightened. They're going after Mom. Callahan grabbed his jacket. Let's go. We're not letting them win. At the hospital, Logan and Callahan found Catherine shaken but unharmed. Security had intercepted a man trying to access her office, and the police were already questioning him. I'm fine, Catherine insisted, though her voice trembled. But they're desperate, Logan. You need to be careful. Logan nodded, his resolve hardening. We've pushed them into a corner. Now it's time to finish this. As night fell, Logan sat in his room, staring out the window. The lights of Oak Ridge shimmered in the distance, a reminder of the fight that lay ahead. We've exposed them, he whispered to himself. Now we have to make sure they can't recover. Outside, a black SUV idled briefly before disappearing into the night. The morning dawned with a tense stillness that belied the storm brewing over Oak Ridge City. Logan Hayes sat in the courthouse holding room, surrounded by files, notes, and the weight of everything he'd uncovered. Today would determine the outcome of years of sacrifice, danger, and unrelenting pursuit of the truth. Detective Jack Callahan entered the room, his expression grim but determined. It's all in place, he said. The feds are on standby, witnesses are under protection, and the media is ready. Now it's up to you. Logan nodded, his nerves tempered by resolve. We've got one shot to make this stick. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Federal agents lined the walls, and the gallery was packed with journalists, community members, and supporters who had followed Logan's fight for justice. Thomas Westbrook himself sat at the defense table, his once smug demeanor replaced by a quiet intensity. Marcus Sterling was nowhere to be seen, still in federal custody after his arrest. Judge Crawford entered, and the room fell silent as he took his seat. This court is now in session, he declared. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, turning to Logan, you may proceed with your final arguments. Logan stood, the weight of the moment pressing on his shoulders. He began with a calm, steady voice that carried through the room. Your Honor, members of the jury, what we've presented over the course of this trial isn't just about my case. It's about a system that has been corrupted at its core, a system that prioritized power and profit over justice. Logan clicked a remote, and a screen displayed financial ledgers, emails, and surveillance logs. These records show how Westbrook Development funneled money into shell companies, bribed officials, and silenced dissent. They didn't just manipulate the justice system, they weaponized it. The jury leaned forward, captivated as Logan continued. But this isn't just about documents. It's about people. People like my father, Alex Hayes, who was framed and imprisoned for uncovering the truth. People like Robert Martinez, who was threatened into giving false testimony. And people like the countless families whose lives were destroyed by Westbrook's greed. Logan's voice rose with passion. Today, we have the chance to set things right. Not just for me, but for everyone who has been silenced, manipulated, and wronged. The evidence is clear. The truth is undeniable. Now it's up to you to deliver justice. As Logan returned to his seat, DA Claire Blackwood rose. Her transformation over the course of the trial was evident. Gone was the ambitious prosecutor who had once targeted Logan. In her place stood an ally determined to see the truth prevail. "Your Honor," Blackwood began, "the state concedes that this case has exposed systemic corruption far beyond what we initially understood. We support the motion to vacate Alex Hayes' conviction and to pursue charges against Thomas Westbrook and his associates." The gallery erupted in whispers as Blackwood presented her closing statement, weaving together the damning evidence Logan had unearthed with her own investigation into the DA's office. The jury deliberated for hours. Outside the courthouse, the crowd grew as news outlets broadcast live updates. Mason worked from a secure location, monitoring social media and ensuring the evidence stayed visible online. "They're trying to discredit us," Mason said over the phone. "Anonymous accounts, fake stories, but it's not working. People are seeing the truth." Inside, Logan sat with Catherine and Callahan, the weight of the waiting pressing down on them. "You've done everything you can," Catherine said, squeezing Logan's hand. "No matter what happens, you've already changed everything." Finally, the jury returned, and the foreperson stood. Judge Crawford addressed them, his voice steady. "Have you reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor," the foreperson replied. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read. "We find Thomas Westbrook guilty on all counts, including conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice." Cheers erupted from the gallery, but Crawford banged his gavel for order. "This is a courtroom, not a stadium," he barked, though even he couldn't hide the hint of satisfaction in his tone. Outside the courthouse, Logan was met with applause and shouts of support. Reporters swarmed him, but he held up a hand to quiet the crowd. "This isn't about me," Logan said, his voice clear and confident. "It's about the truth. It's about holding those in power accountable and proving that justice isn't just for the privileged. Today is a step forward, but the fight isn't over. We have to stay vigilant. We have to keep pushing." That evening, the Hayes family gathered in their living room, the weight of the day finally giving way to relief. Alex Hayes, recently released from prison, sat beside Logan, pride evident in his eyes. "You did it, son," Alex said. "We did it," Logan replied. Catherine joined them, tears in her eyes. "This family never gave up. And now, we've proven that the truth always finds a way." In the days that followed, federal agencies expanded their investigation, uncovering additional layers of corruption linked to Westbrook development. Arrests were made across the state, and reforms were proposed to prevent similar abuses in the future. Logan returned to school, where he was greeted as a hero, though he remained humble. His fight had never been about fame. It was about justice. Late one night, as Logan sat at his desk, he opened a notebook and began writing. It was the start of something new, a guide for others who might one day face the same battles. Because if Logan Hayes had learned one thing, it was this: the system only works when people are brave enough to stand up and fight for what's right.